What's up, everybody? I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our discussion for January 13th, 2024. A lot to go over today, including new data from the Climate Prediction Center on whether or not the El Nino La Nina case, what is it looking like? Plus, and this is what we're actually going to start with, lots of intense, crazy weather going on across the United States. Let me really quickly refresh just to make sure nothing has changed. But National Weather Service homepage, we're going to start off with United States weather first, even though I usually start off with hurricane season, because as you could tell, there is a whole lot of stuff going on across the United States. Most importantly, notable, the cold weather, wind chill warnings in effect through lots of the plains, most of the plains, in fact, and we still have some of these blizzard warnings in effect, probably some heavy snow continuing, and probably some blowing snow, as I'd imagine. This is probably, lots of these areas are seeing some gusty winds as well, so blizzard warnings in effect. There's also winter weather advisories and a bunch of winter storm warnings up for portions of the south. Actually, this winter storm watches. Looks like there'll be another system that moves through there very soon, and I'd imagine so because there's a whole lot of cold air in place now across the United States. So we'll probably see an increase in winter weather and winter sort of setups for storms over the next coming few weeks, and that is a hint towards those along the east. There's been a lot of talk of whether or not that actually happens. But right now, I guess the biggest picture to focus on is just how much cold air will be in place. And this is Ben Knoll. He tweeted this earlier this week, around Thursday or so. And he posted next level cold is headed for the United States. And this map highlights all areas in which it will dip below 0 degrees Fahrenheit at some point in the next 10 days. So this goes all the way out till the 20th of this month. And this is a look, and this is talking about all areas that will see temperatures below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And look at how much of the United States will see temperatures below zero. I mean, that is huge. It'll definitely a whole bunch of the high plains. There'll also be a bunch of the northern, midwestern states. That's where they'll really see this cold at its worst. And a lot of areas that got absolutely slammed by the most recent winter storms we've had over the last week or so, that have seen heavy amounts of snow and a bunch of snow on the ground. It's going to freeze up, and that'll probably be another concern in and of itself, especially in terms of shoveling the snow and getting it out of the way. And probably that snow will stick around for much longer. The positive side, I guess you could say to this, though, is the severe weather threat, especially very much diminished compared to the last few days. We've had enhanced risks consistently since the beginning of the week. That is looking to calm down. Day 2 and even into day 3, there is no notable severe weather being forecast. And then as we head towards day 4, 5, all the way up until day 8, things look much quieter in the severe weather department. So that is good news, but there's a lot of Arctic air in place, and that is lots. That is going to cause lots of concern for the weather, even though we won't have any major storms, at least over the next day or so. But of course, that could change early next week, and we could talk about that another time. Switching gear, though, to the tropics, this is the University of Wisconsin website. A great website, has a bunch of useful tools, but I also like to look at this for tropical cyclone tracking, especially, because us here in the Atlantic, and even those that may be watching from the Eastern Pacific Basin or even the Western Pacific as well, I sometimes get people from all over, mostly in the Atlantic. We know that activity only happens here 6 months out of the year in the northern hemisphere, typically, but in the southern hemisphere, their season is going on right now, so they have activity happening, and very much so with something in the southwestern Indian Ocean, Tropical Storm Belal, I think that's how you pronounce it, and there's also another area of invest. And I just want to talk about this storm really quickly. This is how it looks like. You could clearly see rapidly intensifying. One thing you know why is because we see a bunch of these convective bursts right near the center. And this is forecast indeed by the Joint Typhoon Warning Center to potentially be a pretty intense system over the southwestern Indian Ocean. I believe it will impact some of these islands on its way. I believe this is Mauritius and this is Reunion. So anybody in those islands should definitely prepare and keep an eye out on this system, because this will be intensifying, and it already seems like it is doing so, probably already stronger than the tropical storm status that it has right now, although their scale is a little different in the southwestern Indian Ocean. But bottom line, there is a system going on, and there is always tropical cyclone activity going on at some point in the year, even if it's not in the northern hemisphere. Belal, or I think that's how you pronounce it, I'm just going to say Belal. Belal, the storm we have right now, is definitely a good example of that. But, of course, switching gears to where we are in the Atlantic right now, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies. This is the Norway Coral Reef Watch. This is as of yesterday. This map always updates a day behind, but at least it's better than the last map. If you remember, going back to the days of Noah Nesdis, if you remember that, that's going all the way back to 2020. Those maps are long discontinued now, but those anomaly maps would only be updated every Monday and Thursday. But this is updated every day, although a day behind, so I guess that is a plus. But bottom line, very warm Atlantic, and we actually have stuff to talk about with the Atlantic too, because it is concerningly warm in terms of a climatology standpoint. But the main focus I guess we could talk about right now is the Eastern Pacific. Actually, wait a minute, I think I have the tweet pulled up for the Atlantic first, because I have a bunch of tweets pulled up today. But I mean, that's what happens when you have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. But first of all, Alex Borham, when I did mention the climatology aspect of the Atlantic, he mentions earlier this week, he tweeted, the MDR has generally been much warmer than normal. This warm anomaly has gotten so excessive to the point that it compares to climatology in late July. In January, we already compared to climatology in late July, and he demonstrated with this map here, with using the OISST temperature sort of method, and he demonstrated when the date when he posted this, which was January 10th, so earlier this week, and compared it to Climo from July 29th. Look at that. We even have areas in the MDR that were even slightly warmer than what we typically would be for late July. Very, very crazy stuff. And he does go on to mention, we'll see if this warm holds throughout the spring, but he does mention he believes it is hard to see that it'll be disappearing by then, and I certainly would agree with that. I mean, the Atlantic is just so warm. How else would it cool down, especially significantly, since this has been persistent since early last year? So I definitely agree with him on that. The next part that I want to talk about, though, the next kind of set of lots of things that we got going on today, Nino 3.4 index, that is decreased. El Nino is on its way out, as suggested by the thumbnail, and that is because if we look at the Climate Prediction Center, they released their new ENSO forecast this week as well. Lots of things came out this week, and they say El Nino is expected to continue for the next several seasons, with El neutral. I guess that's another way to call it neutral, but ENSO neutral, favored during the April to June tri-monthly period with a 73% chance. And then look at that, those bars increase. I'll zoom on this map a little bit. You see the El Nino right now. The Climate Prediction Center says that they expect that to continue through up until the spring. And then by the time we get to the spring, we see a bunch of these gray bars reach their peak. That is neutral. And then the third piece of the puzzle, look at these blue bars. That is La Nina. La Nina chances go up. And this is the time period that we especially need to watch, because this is August, September, October, and that is the peak of the hurricane season in the Atlantic. And look at what chance is the highest, La Nina. So that means El Nino is expected to weaken, and the chances continue to rise. We could be looking at least some sort of cool neutral or ENSO neutral look, but increasingly so, chances do seem to be in favor for some sort of La Nina setup to develop sometime later this year. It's not hype, it's just what the facts show, and it's just what the models have, and I'm just trying to tell you exactly what the models show. And Ben Knoll basically parroting the same thing that the Climate Prediction Center is saying, only this time with the NMME update. And that also suggests that oceanic La Nina conditions will be strengthening by the time we get to the Atlantic hurricane season. And they also forecast the Atlantic hurricane season will be warmer than average. And these odds should increase. These drivers, I should say, would greatly increase the odds for an active hurricane season. He mentions that, and you can see this very clearly. El Nino dissipates, and by the time we get to June and into September, which is the end of the NMA forecast, we see this huge cold tongue develop in the Pacific, so La Nina, and then the Atlantic, he mentions as well, stays well above normal throughout the entire forecast period. But Benno does also mention the precipitation forecast, and this is something that some people are kind of iffy about bringing up, but I like to bring it up because I definitely think it has some sort of credit to kind of forecasting at least where we could see most of the activity. He mentions, or at least does show, the moisture content in the atmosphere, the rising motion, that sort of stuff. I believe precipitation is a good way to look at it. And Benno mentions above normal rainfall is strongly favored in the Atlantic MDR, main development region, Caribbean, and Gulf during the hurricane season. But he does, of course, mention, and this is something that we still need to keep out, since it is still very far out, that this is still very early forecast and will be refined. But again, even him too, just like everybody else so far that is posted on Twitter and on all other social medias, when it comes to the topic of the hurricane season this year, these are all concerning signs. For what he mentions is abundant hurricane activity later this year. An interesting choice of words, and I definitely would agree. A whole lot going on with that sort of situation. But all these climate models for about the last 2 months, even going back all the way to the end of last hurricane season, this past season 2023, climate models already looking ahead to this upcoming season. Since then, they've been aggressive. They've been really aggressive and really trying to hammer down the points of the potential for a really active season on hand. And especially if we see these chances for La Nina continue to increase, although even just a cool neutral will probably do it, especially given how warm the Atlantic is. A whole lot of stuff to watch, and definitely a lot of time to watch it. And that's what I think is really good about all of this. We can look at all these climate factors well in advance of the season. So especially for those that like to say that sometimes hurricane season being really active was not advertised at all. Well, now we can't really say that because we have all these factors that are being forecasted to be in place the way they were months in advance from the past. So now we actually do have the tools and the data to look into the future, and that's what I think is really good about it. And that's something that we definitely will utilize a lot, especially here when we talk about hurricane season. And I'll continue to do it till I'm proven wrong. I'm going to continue to show at least what the facts are right now, and that is that hurricane season is definitely a concerning look, although especially with the amount of weather we've been getting here in the United States and the lower 48, that is definitely something to contend with first. We still got to get through the rest of winter, and then severe weather season, and then we'll be at hurricane season. But for now, at least when it comes to hurricane season, the preliminary, let's just call that right now, the preliminary early talks is that it looks potentially active and potentially concerning. I'm going to wrap it up though. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. If you're new, please, I encourage you, like, comment, subscribe. I've seen we've had quite a bit of new people on the channel recently. I thank you so much for tuning in, liking, and subscribing. Appreciate it. Let's keep it going. And until we talk again, please stay safe. Lots of stuff going on, not only in the weather, but in terms of world, conflicts as well. Lots of stuff going on. So really hope everybody stays safe, and we will talk again soon.